Good day, and welcome to this episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. I'm Edward, otherwise known as the Lightkeeper. I hope everyone out there is having a great week. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of the podcast, just wanted to share some kind of exciting news. Well, I don't know necessarily how exciting it is. It could get exciting, one bit of it. As I'm recording this, it is spring here in the state known for its Great Lakes and great times, which means storms are a fact of life. So if you hear something that sounds like the rumble of thunder in the background, it doesn't mean that my neighbor has Garth Brooks's song and the thunder rolls cranked up really loud. It is actually thunder. Um, and we do have the wonderful threat of tornadoes today. Hopefully that does not happen. While I love a good storm, I do not love twisters. Quick funny story about twisters. In college, I had the opportunity to live with three gentlemen from Malaysia, and this will date me, but the movie Twister had just come out on home video, and we were watching it. And after the video was over, they all had a good laugh and said to the effect, "It's amazing how Hollywood comes up with these things. Like thinking of a storm would cause wind to spin like that and pick up cows." And I said, "Well, that's truthful. They exist and they happen here." And they were just absolutely shocked. And it wasn't a couple of weeks later that there was a horrible thunderstorm, which caused the tornado sirens to go off just as my roommate was jumping into the shower, and he hollered at me and said, "If there is a twister, please get me out of the shower because I do not want to die naked." Anyways, that's my hokey and old uh, story about tornadoes. The other thing you'll notice about this episode is we are not going to be taking a break for an advertisement. There are two reasons for that. The first is that Anchor, who had sponsored the podcast from very early on, was acquired by Spotify, and Spotify has a different payment processor than the folks at Anchor did, and the payment processor, which is who would handle the transaction, deems conversation about DS or BDSM as pornographic, and they do not support pornographic material. So it is an unintended consequence, if you will, about being open and discussing the lifestyle, that there is no longer a sponsorship portion. But that is good for you, the listener, bad for me. In the sense that I can't occasionally pick up a coffee for the fruits of my podcasting labors, if you will. But it is what it is. So I just wanted to share that just in case you were curious why I ramble nonstop in this episode rather than stopping for a pause. So the other night I couldn't sleep and I was channel surfing on the couch, and lo and behold, I found Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Love that movie. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. It's hilarious, cracks me up. I always sort of identified a little bit with Cameron, not quite as so much, but I would have loved to have been Cameron's shoes when Sloane, that was the character's name. Sloane decided to change her clothes. That would have been a highlight of my teen years had that happened to me. However, Cameron's dip to the bottom of the pool and Ferris Bueller becoming his hero would not have been part of my repertoire as a teen. But to see Sloane topless would definitely have been a highlight. But one of the things that struck with me, and it really struck a chord because it's something that I've just been tossing in my mind lately, and it's sort of this tennis match that's been going on, like a rally at Wimbledon where the players are hitting the ball back and forth with vigor, and my mind's been popping back and forth on it. There's been no grunting or groaning, though. I don't know whether you want to say fortunately or unfortunately. I'm going to say fortunately because that would be awkward in my mind. At least for me, it would be awkward. But the thing that had been ping ponging or tennis balling around in my mind um, is highlighted by Ferris Bueller's comment. And I believe Ferris was somehow talking about a school assignment, but isms. And Ferris says, in his opinion, isms are not good. And the isms that I'm tennis balling in my mind are two in regards to the lifestyle. And they're two subjects that are not easy to talk about, are not, in my opinion, talked about enough. Thus, we're having this conversation today about them. And those isms are racism and sexism in the lifestyle. Those two things can really only be combated, if you will, by having discussions about them. And so I ask for your grace as we go through this and we talk about them because they're not easy subjects to talk about. And I know that as a white CIS man, that there are that that yeah, I have some privileges because of just how I was born. No other reason than that. So I guess we will start. Well, I guess we are going to start with talking about racism in the lifestyle. And unfortunately, racism and BDSM and DS, it's not new. It's something that has been there and been here for years and years. In fact, if you look at the history of the lifestyle, which we did a few podcasts ago, briefly going through some of it, the history of the lifestyle in the United States really grew out of the Second World War when we had the leather culture, which grew out of bands of World War II veterans looking to connect and find a community. And the thing about the United States during the Second World War and afterwards, it was a very sexist society and it was also very racist. Um, the military, we now sort of gloss over it. And if you watch any of the movies that deal with, say, World War II or that time period, or even documentaries on it, I do want to just plug Ken Burns. He did a documentary called The War, which focused on the Second World War, and he did openly and, in my opinion, very honestly talk about the racist divides that were happening in the United States at that time. But if we watch Hollywood now, or even if we listen to politicians now, they so desperately like wanna, for lack of a better word, whitewash over the craptastic history of the United States and racism. And so during and after the Second World War, America was segregated, especially in the South. You know, if you were a person of color in the South, you were, had to ride at the back of the bus. You could not use the white drinking fountain. The police regularly use their position of authority to take advantage, beat, whatever, and there were no consequences for it. It was and is sickening. So it's out of this era that the lifestyle sprang in the United States. So, yes, racism is going to be heavily rooted within the lifestyle. And yeah, it's not easy to say, and it stinks, and it can even be seen, and in some cases, rightfully so, as an expression of white privilege and control. It's just, for example, if we look at the lifestyle and we compare somebody like me, a white male, my experience as a dominant is going to be much different than, say, a person of color who is a dominant. Even if they are a male, taking that male supremacy part of it, typically, and it's an unconscious bias, if you will, but for years and years, people of color are seen as less capable um, of being dominant because of that unconscious bias that somehow says that if you are a person of color, you're a submissive. And that's something that I, as a younger person, never ever thought about. And yet, if you look at how historically uh, history has been written, people of color have been seen as submissive. They have been slaves. They have been enslaved. They have been treated differently in horrible, horrible ways. And those cultural stereotypes still do exist in the lifestyle where people of color may have to prove themselves, especially if they are dominant, that they are capable as a dominant rather than, say, me, who could walk into a kinktastic gathering of kinky people. And if somebody asked me my role and I said dominant, it would just be accepted. Where a person of color, unfortunately, may be made to feel that they have to prove that they are capable to be a dominant. And it's just, it just, when you think about it, it doesn't make sense because the color of your skin has no bearing on a lifestyle role or what you enjoy, but it's there and it's still a part of the lifestyle, and therefore we're talking about it today. And there are stereotypes. We talked about, people of color having to prove themselves, especially if they want to be a dominant, or even feeling excluded or marginalized from events, because sadly many lifestyle events are made up of like-minded, like-looking people. I live near the big city near me is Detroit, which is a very segregated city, unfortunately, but it is the fact. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but the interstate highway system and white flight, and there are numerous reasons why all of this happened. But even if you look at the gatherings in the community, typically, if you go to a gathering in suburbia, which is what is typically most convenient for me, yeah, it's mostly white. And fortunately, there are groups of and getting together where people of color group specific for them, so that that there can be a comfort and shared experiences without having to feel odd or awkward about their background. And then the other thing that we have in the lifestyle is racial fetishes. And you see it all the time. For example, a common one to see, especially if you're online, are people that have fetishes about, say, Asians. People of Asian descent are often fetishized, or are made a fetish. Same with blacks or Latino. Any ethnic group can be, and probably is, made into a fetish. And not that all fetishes like that are racist, but when they're rooted in stereotypes and things like that, they are. Um, it really kind of kind of depends. Getting back to the, you know, people who have a fetish about people of Asian descent, typically it may not be racist. They could just be attracted to people um, of that descent. But if your sole attraction is because somebody is Asian, not for any other reasons, then that's where we have a problem. It's one thing to say, I find this person attractive because of all these reasons. But if the only sole reason or the sole thing that one is looking for in somebody is their ethnicity, then yeah, that's a problem. And so it's not easy to discuss. It's not easy to say this is racist, this isn't racist. It's not. Yet it's not clear cut in some cases. In some cases, yeah, it's very clear cut, but in other cases, it's not. We're in that proverbial 50 shades of gray. But it's something that we need to talk about and discuss. Um, and so, what are some of the things that we see in the lifestyle that are openly racist? And there are people who refuse to participate in things with people of different races, I'm sorry. They will, out and out refuse to participate or be a part of. Well, that's pretty clear cut. There are other people who, for whether it's lack of education or if it's ignorance or just plain old-fashioned racism, they will refuse to learn from their mistakes with the terminology they use and use improper terminology to refuse to refer to people of different races or backgrounds. And just going along with that, you have people that will not allow, unfortunately, and there are some groups out there. Personally, I don't know of any, and I can't point and say this group or that group, but there are groups that will not allow different races to participate in their activities. And of course, there are racial slurs or jokes. Oh, it was just a joke. Um, and that reminds me of something that Will Wheaton put out on Twitter a while ago. I think Will Wheaton and I, the actor Will Wheaton and I, are roughly around the same age, and he was discussing how back when he was a child, the only places that people would talk about race and even gender issues, for example, gay people were comedians. And, Eddie Murphy and Andrew Dice Clay and, oh, I can't even begin to think of some more of the comedians from that era, were definitely not good, positive places to go for knowledge or education. I mean, a comedian is there to make you laugh. They are not there to teach, although some comedians do teach, and you can find wisdom in things that they say now. But back then, that wasn't the case. So there's that. You will also find people that show favoritism to one race over another. It happens in our daily lives, and it happens within the kink community. There are other people, once again, just like in our daily lives, who will refuse to acknowledge people of different cultural backgrounds or their experiences being would be different because they have a different background than we do. Like what I was saying before about people of color, especially if they are a dominant, like having extra steps to jump through to prove that they are truly dominant, rather than just having it just be accepted as it should be. There are also people in the lifestyle who are going to make assumptions based on race, like we talked about, somebody of color not being able to be a dominant or be a good dominant, and it's simply because of their race, and that's wrong. There will also be, and this is something you do see in the lifestyle, and you see it unfortunately fairly commonly. Perhaps you don't see it because you're not looking for it, but I challenge you going forward to keep an eye open for language that implies the superiority of one race over another. And it happens, it's there, and you can see it. Just keep your eyes open and you'll be like, whoa. And the more you see it, the more you'll be aware of it, and you will be unfortunately shocked at how often you see it within the community. Then there are, as I said, the assumptions that get made, which also goes along with not just roles, but sexual preferences or desires or somebody's past experience based on their race happens in the lifestyle. Another one that is unfortunately happens that white people will make assumptions about people of color that they are more exotic or they're more kinky for some reason just because their skin is a different color. boggles my mind, but it exists and it's out there, and you can and you will see it and encounter it. And finally, of course, we have those that will exclude people of color from their activities and their events. And yeah, that just drives me personally bonkers. So that's why I want to talk about these so we all can be more aware. Another thing that I can remember the first time I encountered it was somebody talking about race play. And what race play is where people through BDSM use lifestyle role play to explore issues such as racism, colonialism, white privilege within the dynamic of a DS or BDSM relationship. And the first time I heard about it, I was angry, I was upset, and I thought, this is wrong. This is so wrong. We shouldn't allow it. And I was, pretty hot under the collar about it. And it wasn't too long after that that it just worked out that I had a ski trip out west planned. And where I came back, I was flying in and out of Chicago O'Hare, and there was a lifestyle convention going on very close to the airport that coincided with my return. So I thought, perfect, I'll extend my vacation and attend this convention. And there was actually a class on this very subject of racism in the lifestyle. And so I asked the instructor after they talked about it if race play was something that was acceptable. And they said something that really stuck with me. And they are a person of color and also, a mental health provider, trained mental health provider, not just somebody self-taught, but, college degreed and have all their credentials and they specialize, one of their subsets is the lifestyle. And so when we were having a conversation about it, the biggest things that I learned is if it's consensual, both parties are consenting, no, there's no coercion, that race play and role playing these types of scenarios can be both educational because when you're role playing, you're kind of in that moment, you're in that time, so you are learning firsthand about these experiences. It's safe because we're consenting and practicing making it safer, as we should with everything that we practice within the lifestyle. And it also helps people overcome past traumas that deal with this, especially if they are a person of color. It can be very beneficial to helping them with past traumas related to it. So that was a very eye-opening experience where something that I was so adamant and thought that this is so wrong and how could we allow this, and then educating myself, I learned that, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be bad. It can be done in wrong ways, just like spanking can be done in wrong ways. But how we approach it and how we handle it can really, really make a difference. So that was a huge, huge learning curve about it. And in fact, um, there's a terminology which I believe I've done a podcast on way back, way in the Wayback Machine somewhere. I think the episode's called "If I Was King for a Day," something like that. And or perhaps my memory is just a little muddy after my workday. But there's a terminology that I wish we could deep six in the lifestyle because of its racist and sexist connotations, and that is master slave. It may surprise you because MS relationships have been around for, really forever and ever in this lifestyle. But I am a history nerd. And so when somebody says master slave to me, even if it's in a lifestyle event, in a lifestyle context, my mind defaults to slave quarters on southern plantations from back in the 1850s and before, and how horrible and how oppressive they were. So that's where my mind immediately goes when somebody says master slave. And an example of, I guess, how we try, perhaps as white people, to rationalize something like this is I took a tour of Jefferson Davis's home after the Civil War, which, boy, if memory serves, is somewhere in the vicinity of Biloxi, Mississippi. And there, the tour guide, an old white lady, um, didn't mention slavery at all, and had mentioned, obviously, because slavery was over, but did mention that they treated their black servants like family. So after the tour was over and it was question and answer time, I asked if they had preserved any of the quarters that the servants lived in, because I was very curious with how this compared to, for example, the slave quarters at George Washington's Mount Vernon home. And of course, they did not. But she reiterated they were treated like family. And I just thought, yeah, I probably don't think family was treated that way. And then you look at the way slavery is represented at Mount Vernon, at least the way it was a few years ago when I visited in BC time before COVID. It was shown to be what it was. It was shown to be the nasty, ugly, disgusting thing that it was. There was no hiding it. There was no trying to gloss over. This was just absolutely the worst. And I don't think anybody who sees it these days could imagine living in those conditions that America's first president, George Washington, held his slaves in. And their tour guides there did not try to hide it. They didn't try to tell any nice stories about how they were treated like family. I'm sure some were treated better than others, but it was just absolutely hideous. So that's where my mind goes when somebody says master slave to me. And I understand in the lifestyle it means something completely different, but it's a mental hurdle that my mind can't cross. Every time I try to jump that hurdle, I knock it down and fall flat on my face because this is what comes back. So that's a term that I personally would love to see us lose from the lifestyle. And I'll come back to it a little bit when we talk about sexism because, gee, it has sexist connotations as well. So, what can we do about racism in the lifestyle? There has to be things that we can do. And the first thing is to go out and teach yourself about racism and BDSM in the community and how it affects and how it impacts those today involved in the lifestyle. And it's not a fun journey. It's not fun to dig into, but it's something that we all should do. The other thing that I would encourage everyone to do is to speak up when we see it. Even though I'm a white male, if I see it, I'm going to speak up. And if you can take action to address it, please do. I mean, that's if we are silent, our silence, I think it's a Plato quote, could be wrong, maybe it's Socrates, but silence is consent. And in this case, if we're silent, we see it and we stay silent, we are consenting to that behavior. So don't stay silent. Speak up. You don't have to speak up and be angry and cross and accusatory, but speak up and say something. And when we speak up and we say something, the other thing it leads to is having open and honest communication and conversations about racism and how it impacts the lifestyle and how it impacts each of us. So when we see it, stand up, say something, and also let's just talk about it. Even if we don't agree, but we talk about it and we're civil about it, it's going to make a huge difference. So now, if you don't mind, we will transition over to another ism, and that is sexism. So, the very first thing that I'll start with when it comes to sexism is a question. Can you be involved in DS and identify as a feminist? Can you be a feminist and be in DS? Can you be a female submissive and be a feminist? Absolutely. Just because in your personal relationship you want a dominant partner who may be male, it does not mean that you don't believe that you should be treated equally. Because even in a DS relationship, the submissive technically has all the control because they can say no at any point and at any time for any reason. So there is a synergy, good corporate word there, between feminist and the lifestyle because both the majority of people within the lifestyle do advocate for the rights and safety of anybody who's marginalized. So yes, you can be involved in the lifestyle and consider yourself a feminist, no matter your gender or what role fits your soul. So yeah, they do go hand in hand. There's no conflict between them. And in really, if you think about it, if the lifestyle community works with people who want to inspire change, we can make a great partner. However, with that said, the lifestyle can still be problematic when it comes to gender roles. Three kind of common examples of problematic issues within the lifestyle and gender roles is the expectation that submissive partners are always female, dominant partners male. That's a fairly common misconception. In fact, I would say that's one of the misconceptions that leads to the growth of the alpha submissive, if you will, because online alpha submissives, you will see this fairly often, will talk about how they are strong, capable people. The big problem that I have with alpha submissives is when you see any memes or gifs or people who identify as alpha submissive or talk about it, they always talk about the alpha submissive as a strong, capable woman. Not just a strong, capable person, but they are always a strong, capable woman, which to me is putting a sexist thing there because if you are a strong, capable person who is any gender other than a woman, you cannot be an alpha submissive because it has this gender connotation. So that's my big pet peeve there. But the lifestyle has the myth, if you will, that submissives are female, dominants are male. The other thing that and it goes hand in hand, as a society, typically people tend to unjustly believe, not everyone, but unfortunately many, that women for some reason are more naturally, air quotes there, naturally submissive, and men are, once again, air quotes, naturally dominant. That's not true. There are male submissives there, but for some reason that's it's a common belief. And the other thing that goes along with that is because of these assumptions, it makes it harder for women to be seen as dominant partners or that they should keep their dominant desires hidden in a way and just be a passive participant with things because you're a woman. And those are common sexist misconceptions about the DS dynamic. And also kind of going along with that is those who use the lifestyle to reinforce traditional gender roles, gender-based power dynamics, or that one partner has to be dominant and the other has to be submissive based on their gender. Now, there is nothing wrong with someone who identifies female, wants to be submissive, and have a male partner who is dominant. There's nothing wrong with that as long as, it's done with consent. And the other important thing is that it's done so that it's not, I guess the best way to explain it for me is that's great. But for example, if you have children, don't say, "Oh, Susie, you can't be a fireman because that's a male job, but you can be a nurse." Or you can't be a doctor because you are female, but you can be a nurse. Or just like, for some reason, the stigma that some people have that men shouldn't be nurses, that they should be doctors and women should be nurses. That's crap. So it's important to be aware that sexism, it floats around the lifestyle. But as participants or people who are curious and exploring the lifestyle, it's on us to work together and to work hard to try and keep the lifestyle free of gender biases. A gender bias thing that really kind of struck me as being very sexist is what's called the patriarchy, which is the idea, and it's the old fashioned idea that the dominant partner is always a male and the submissive partner is always female. And it's important to remember that when this is, and this is what you see most when you read, that BDSM, a good smutty BDSM novel or erotica, or even if you are active in your in-person community, you typically see more male dominance, female submissives. So it's what we see, and often what the outside world sees of us. So when we have that patriarchal view, we have to remember that it's done with consent. The people in those relationships, um, that's what they've consented to. That's what they want. And as I said before, the problem where I have it is when they start to impose that across the board. For example, when it's all females must serve their dominant male partner, then that's where we cross the line for me into sexism. And so that's where for me the key dividing line is. You may disagree, and that's fine. This is why we're having this conversation, because it's just that, it's a conversation where you can see where I'm coming from, and hopefully out there, if you want to interact and respond, I'd love to have a conversation. We can have a conversation about it, even if you disagree with me, because I am definitely have never been crowned king of kink, and I don't think I'd ever want to have that responsibility. It would be way too much. It would take the fun out of it. So the key with that is just how you treat others and how you teach others, along with being consent and not coerced. So just like people of color who have to fight to be accepted as any other role than submissive, people who identify as female have that same battle. They still have to face a little bit of that uphill battle, because so much of all the things put out on DS, whether it's fictional works to blogs and memes, it typically, stereotypically identifies male dominant, female submissive. So a female identifying dominant is going to have to earn their stripes rather than just perhaps have their dominance accepted. Because female dominance are less common than men, they really do have to kind of jump through some extra hoops to build their street cred, if you will. Um, And we see that in the language we use in the lifestyle. I try very hard when I post on my blog or Instagram or Facebook and all those, all the social media outlets, or when I write or even do one of these podcasts, I really try very hard to be as gender neutral as I can. I know I am not perfect, and I also know that at times I will be expressing something personal, which as a straight male, that personal expression is going to be male dominant, female submissive, because that's my jam. But I don't want to ever make it feel like I am saying that because that's my jam, it has to be your jam and your jam and your jam, and that's the only jam we have. That's just so not the case. So the other thing that we have to be careful of, and it's something that perhaps if you step back and look, it's something that can be a concern if we all step back and kind of take that 10,000-foot view of the lifestyle. The masculine dominant, feminine submissive thing that overrides and flows through so much of this lifestyle can almost lead to somebody who is a woman, or identifies as female, to feel that if they want to be in this lifestyle, it's almost as though all of that, lack of a better word, propaganda that is out there could somehow be coercing them into situations that they don't consent to, where they feel they must show submission because of their gender. So, how do we reduce the gender bias in the lifestyle? First, try to be as gender neutral as we can when we discuss BDSM activities, roles, and everything about the lifestyle. And if you're an alpha submissive and you're going to make a meme or a GIF, or you're going to talk about being an alpha submissive, ladies, drop the woman out of there, or drop the female, whatever gender identifier, because I think every submissive is a strong, capable person. And just because, we need to really work to drop gender specific language wherever we can, and also respect and support those who participate in the lifestyle regardless of gender and their role. If you encounter somebody who identifies as female and dominant, don't be cognizant of the fact that this person has probably had to prove themselves, prove their worth, just because of the gender they identify with. And so be cognizant of that when you encounter somebody who is feminine and dominant. And once again, educate yourself. Education, education, education. The more we know, the better it is. So the more we know about gender bias in the lifestyle, the more we can be aware of our own mistakes that we've made, the things that we've said. Looking back, it's like, oh boy, I can't believe they came out of my mouth. That I didn't mean it like that, but good Lord, it could have been this. So the more we know, the more we can avoid putting our foot in our mouth. Even if we don't mean it a certain way, sometimes things come out of our mouths wrong. We're human. It happens. Um, an example of this, I remember, this was a few years ago as well, encountering a male dominant online, and we were talking, he had some questions, and he was very adamant on his blog that he was a feminist. But also, if you started reading some of his posts, he was sharing things that said basically all women are designed to serve men. And I remember questioning him and saying, how can you identify as a feminist yet believe this? And at that point, poof, he disappeared. But you'll encounter things like that. You'll encounter people that say, oh, I support, I'm a feminist, or I support equality amongst all the sexes or races. But then you see things that they say that just doesn't jive. So just educate yourself, and try to be aware of your own biases, because we all have them, and we can all try our best to avoid them, but we do have them. And the more we learn, the better we better job we all can do. Um, and just like racism, have communication, have dialogue, talk about it. It's not something that we need to keep swept under the rug. And when we do talk about it, it's something that, as you know, everything these days can inflame passions to levels that are just insanely high. And so when we have dialogue and we have communication about these issues, not only strive to be calm and be open, but be respectful and don't do it in ways that may inflame passions, or if you feel your comments unfortunately are inflaming passions, work to throw some water on it to calm things down. Because when everyone feels safe and respected, we can really grow as a community. And also recognize that within the lifestyle, when it comes to sexism, uh, the lifestyle can be a very powerful tool, especially for people who are exploring their own gender expression or their own gender identity. They're exploring, they're working to figure it out, or they've figured it out, and they find that BDSM is something that works for them, and the DS lifestyle is fabulous. And so when you see things from people like recently, I saw somebody who identifies as a dominant but is also very conservative. That's nothing against people who have conservative values. But if you have conservative values and you are involving yourself in the lifestyle, understand that not everybody is going to identify with the gender they were born. Now, you may not like that, but it's not a place. This is not a place to go and spew bunk about it. So we need to just be conscious of the fact that the lifestyle is so diverse that there are going to be people that perhaps we don't personally agree with their lifestyle choices, but we need to respect that it's their life and their choices. And when we are discussing things with a partner, possible partner, getting to know somebody, or even if we are just going to be engaging, say, in casual play with somebody, we need to negotiate and discuss boundaries and limits. But also, when we're having those conversations, we need to be conscious of the isms that do exist in the lifestyle. And when we're conscious about it and we're having those discussions, those negotiations, and we're setting our boundaries, when we're conscious of our isms and our own biases, we can we can talk about them. And finally, while this may not be an opportunity available to everyone, but the wonderful thing is the internet makes a lot available to a lot of people, especially with online classes and online discussion groups. Go out there and find a good workshop on gender bias or racial bias or racism and the lifestyle. They exist, they're out there. Attend one, because the more you know, the better off we'll be. And the more we know, the better we can make our lifestyle. So thank you for listening to this discussion. And while I know having a conversation about isms, and I know I didn't cover all the isms because there's a whole lot more isms we could talk about, and I do know that I endeavor to make the lifestyle discussions here on this podcast positive and upbeat, and this topic is not something that is a fun topic to discuss, but it's a topic that needs to be discussed, and we need to have these conversations so we can make the lifestyle safer, more inclusive, and all around better. So I hope you don't mind that we have this conversation, and I appreciate you listening and keeping your mind open. And like I said before, I would love to have conversations with you about this and how we can do better, or things that I screwed up today, things that I can do better, because I know I can do better. And I'm sure if you listened, you probably heard something that perhaps was even cringeworthy, and I apologize for that. But I feel that if I don't have a discussion about it with other people, and those other people right now are you, how can I expect anyone else out there to do it if I won't do it myself? So that is kind of the motivation that was behind this conversation. I hope that you found something in there that was meaningful to you, and I want to invite you to follow the podcast wherever you listen. Go ahead and right now go over and click that follow button, and that way you won't miss any episodes of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. I also want to invite you to a new project that I've launched. If you happen to follow my Instagram, Facebook, or my blog over on Tumblr, you'll notice that for the last several months I've been doing a little video presentation called the Daily DS, which is just a quick question, a quick thought about the lifestyle. And they typically run from 1 to 3 minutes, 3 minutes kind of being the max out there. They're nothing deeper in depth, just sort of like a daily little nugget to make you think about the lifestyle. And I am now putting those out as a podcast, as in addition to being available on social media. Um, they're very easy to find. All you do is search for Chatting with the Lightkeeper Presents the Daily DS. I know that seems like a lot, but if you type in wherever you get your podcasts, Chatting with the Lightkeeper Presents, it's going to pop right up. So I look forward to people signing up and subscribing to those. They're just real quick little nuggets of DS. And if you listen on Spotify, you will actually get to see my face because they're actually a vlog on Spotify. So you can actually see me talking rather than just listening to me talk like you are now. So once again, don't forget to click that follow button. And I have a question that I would really love your feedback. I know we've talked about my opinion on master and slave. And so if you listen on Spotify and you're on Spotify mobile right now, go ahead and kind of scroll down and answer the poll question whether we should consider changing or dropping the role of master and slave out of the lifestyle. And no matter where you're listening, if you would scroll down and just send some feedback. I am very curious if you've experienced any sexism or racism in the lifestyle, and if you have, what was it, and how did you handle it? Um, the more we talk about it, the better we'll make the community. So, if you're comfortable, I would appreciate you sharing your thoughts and having a conversation with it about it. So, thank you for listening, and I will chat with you all next week.